I am Gretchen Lewis, 35 years old, someone who has always believed that special family moments should bring us closer together. I had looked forward to my parents' 30th wedding anniversary as a rare chance to feel warmth, to reflect, and to cherish one another. But right there in front of all the guests, my parents turned to me with cold faces and said, "What are you doing here? You're not welcome here." Those words fell like a knife, cutting through every hope I had held on to. My own family, on what should have been a day of celebration, chose to cast me out. Behind them stood my sister, the ever-favored child, her eyes glinting with cruel delight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply smiled and whispered, "Understood." Yet when a familiar figure from the past walked in, the smugness on her face vanished instantly. The room fell silent, heavy with tension, as if a storm was about to break. And that was only the beginning. Do you believe that the ones we love most are also the ones who can hurt us the deepest? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. I want to hear your perspective. The older I got, the more I realized without me, our family would have fallen apart long ago. Leaky roof, I called the contractor. Mom's car broke down, I paid for the repairs. Dad's medical expenses. My paycheck took the hit. As a software engineer making six figures, I could afford it. But it wasn't just about money. It became an expectation. My parents treated me like their personal ATM, and I let them, thinking that was what family meant. Meanwhile, my sister got a free pass. She was an influencer, all filters and glitter on Instagram, but her bank account was as empty as her promises. My parents adored her anyway, her charm, her photos, her so-called brand. They bragged about her to the neighbors while I was the one wiring money to keep the lights on. It started small. At 25, I paid off Dad's credit card debt $10,000 because he swore it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. By 30, I was covering Mom's hospital copays, their late mortgage payments, even my sister's phone bill when she forgot to pay it. At first, I didn't mind. I thought I was helping. But every time I handed over money, my sister would roll her eyes like I was showing off. She'd post about her Malibu photo shoots while I was stuck debugging code to fund her lifestyle. My parents never noticed. They'd say she's building her career, as if my job was just a side hustle. Last year, Mom called me about their 30th wedding anniversary. "We want something special," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "A big party like the ones in magazines." I agreed. I thought it would be a chance to bring us together, maybe even earn a thank you for once. I was wrong. My sister jumped in, tossing out ideas as if she were planning the Oscars. A live band, imported flowers, a coastal resort in Santa Barbara. She had a vision, but not a dime to pay for it. "You've got this, right?" she said without looking up from her phone. I nodded, already calculating the hit to my savings. I booked the resort, a stunning venue with ocean views, famous for hosting high-end events. The deposit alone was $5,000, all on my credit card. I coordinated with the manager, arranged catering for 100 guests, and secured a string quartet for the cocktail hour. My sister kept adding to the list: a custom cake, a photo booth, even a floral arch that cost more than my monthly rent. Each time she'd say, "It's for Mom and Dad," and I bit my tongue. My parents backed her up. "Let her shine," Dad said, as if I were just the logistics grunt. Mom chimed in. "She has such a creative mind." Creative maybe, but I was the one signing the contracts. Soon I started noticing things. My sister dodged my calls whenever I asked about her contribution. She'd text back vague promises, "I'll chip in later," but later never came. My parents didn't care. They'd gush about her latest sponsored skincare post while I sat on hold with the florist negotiating delivery fees. It stung, but I pushed through. I wanted the party to be perfect, not for me, but for them. I told myself they would finally see me, not just my wallet. By the time the plans were finalized, I'd poured $20,000 into the event. My sister hadn't paid a cent, and my parents hadn't offered. I was used to it, Their gratitude always went to her, never to me. But something felt different this time. There was a tension I couldn't place, like they were hiding something. I brushed it off, focusing on the details, table settings, guest lists, sound checks. I kept telling myself it would all be worth it when I saw them smile at the party. That was my mistake. I didn't know that the very party I had sacrificed everything for would become the stage for their betrayal. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. My sister's carefree attitude, my parents' blind favoritism, it was all right there, plain as day. But I was too busy playing the good daughter, the reliable one, to notice the cracks. That changed the moment I received a message that turned everything upside down. With the party just weeks away, I dove into the details to ensure everything was perfect. I called the Santa Barbara Resort daily, confirming the layout for 100 chairs, the sound system's volume for speeches, and the timing for the cake delivery. The manager walked me through the schedule: cocktail hour at 6, dinner at 7, dancing by 8. I'd already paid a $5,000 deposit, my credit card taking the hit, and signed contracts for catering and a string quartet. My sister kept texting new demands: a vegan menu option, a spotlight for the dance floor, extra staff for a photo booth. Each one added hundreds to the bill, but when I asked her to cover something, she'd reply, "I'm curating the aesthetic." Curating, I was the one juggling invoices while she posed for her followers. I tried talking to Mom about the costs. "Don't upset your sister," she said, her voice sharp over the phone. "She's putting so much heart into this." Heart, I was coordinating with vendors while she was picking filters for her stories. Dad was no better. "Let her have her moment," he told me during a call, as if my effort was just background noise. I pushed back, mentioning how she hadn't contributed a dime. "You're the responsible one," he said, like it was a compliment. It wasn't. Their words felt like a script they'd rehearsed for years, always shielding her, always expecting me to carry the load. I swallowed my frustration and kept working, checking the resort's table linens and confirming the bartender's license. Then I noticed her evasiveness. I'd text her about the budget and she'd leave me on red. Once I called and she picked up, sounding annoyed. "I'm swamped with collabs," she said, then hung up. Collabs. I checked our family's shared bank account, set up for things like roof repairs. It should have had $20,000, half from me. The balance was $5,000. My stomach dropped. I called the bank, heart pounding, and asked for a transaction history. The clerk confirmed multiple withdrawals, hundreds for clothes, thousands for a weekend getaway, all tied to my sister's card. $15,000 gone. I texted her, "Explain the account." Her reply, "Relax, it's under control." It wasn't. I called Mom and Dad, hoping they'd step in. "She's just borrowing." Mom said, her tone dismissive, like I was overreacting. "Don't cause a scene before the party." Dad added, "You've got the means, Gretchen. Can't you handle it?" Handle it? I'd handled their mortgage, their medical bills, now their party. I pulled up the bank statements on my laptop, my hands shaking. The withdrawals weren't random designer shoes, a hotel in Miami, a car down payment. My parents had access to the account. They'd seen the same statements but told me to keep the peace. Their loyalty to her was a wall I couldn't break through. I wanted to confront her, but the party was too close. I spent my nights double-checking the resort's lighting setup, ensuring the vegetarian entrees were prepped, and confirming the quartet's song list. Every task kept me sane, kept me from exploding. My sister, meanwhile, posted a teaser about the event of the year, taking credit for my work. I was ready to let it slide, just get through the day, make my parents happy. Then my phone lit up with a message from Sheila Ramsey, an old friend of my sister's I hadn't spoken to in years. "We need to talk about her," it read. "She's been lying to you." My pulse raced. This was bigger than I'd thought. The message from Sheila sent a chill through me. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she and my sister drifted apart after college. I replied, suggesting we meet at a small cafe in Santa Barbara, a quiet spot away from prying eyes. A week before the party, I sat across from Sheila at a corner table, the smell of coffee doing little to calm my nerves. She looked hesitant, her fingers tapping the edge of her mug. I didn't want to get involved. She started, her voice low, but she's gone too far. She slid a folder across the table stuffed with papers that would change everything. I opened it, my hand steady but my heart racing. Inside were screenshots of texts between Sheila and my sister dating back months. I lent her $2,000 for a business deal. Sheila explained, her tone bitter. She never paid me back. The texts showed my sister promising repayment, then dodging with excuses, I'm waiting on a sponsor, or next month, I swear. Next came receipts, online purchases for luxury sunglasses, a spa weekend, even a deposit for a leased BMW. Then the real blow, bank statements from our family account highlighting withdrawals totaling $15,000. My contributions were in there, meant for home repairs, not her shopping sprees. Sheila pointed to a date. She withdrew $5,000 last month alone, she said. I tracked it because she tried borrowing from me again. I stared at the numbers, my throat tightening. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal. Sheila leaned forward, her eyes sharp. She's been doing this for years, she said. Lying, borrowing, spending. I thought you should know before the party. I nodded, unable to speak. The evidence was undeniable, but I needed to be sure. I thanked Sheila, tucked the folder under my arm, and drove straight to my bank. The clerk confirmed it all. Multiple unauthorized withdrawals, all linked to my sister's card, some as recent as 2 weeks ago. I asked about my parents' access to the account. They get alerts for every transaction, the clerk said. My stomach twisted. They'd known all along. That evening, I called Mom and Dad, hoping for some shred of accountability. I laid it out, the missing $15,000, the receipts, the texts. She's been reckless, I said, keeping my voice calm. Mom's response was instant. Don't stir up trouble, she snapped. She's under pressure with her career. Pressure? I was the one funding their anniversary while she blew our savings on a car. Dad jumped in, his tone softer but no less infuriating. Just let it go, Gretchen, he said. We'll sort it out after the party. Sort it out. They'd seen the alerts, known about the withdrawals, and done nothing. They were protecting her again, like always. I pressed harder, asking why they hadn't stopped her. Family comes first, Mom said, as if I wasn't family too. I hung up my hand, shaking with anger. I sat in my apartment, the folder open on my coffee table, staring at the evidence. My sister's lies, my parents' complicity. It was all there in black and white. I thought about confronting her right then, dragging the truth into the open, but the party was too close. I'd spent months planning, poured my savings into it. Canceling wasn't an option, not yet, but letting her walk away unscathed wasn't either. I closed the folder, my mind racing. Sheila's words echoed, she's gone too far. She had, and my parents had let her. I wasn't going to let this slide. The day of the party arrived, and I was at the Santa Barbara resort by noon, double-checking every detail. I walked through the banquet hall, ensuring the centerpieces were aligned, the microphone levels were set for speeches, and the catering staff had the dessert menu on schedule. Everything was perfect, just as I'd planned. I'd poured my heart and money into this, and for a moment I let myself believe it might finally earn me some respect. Then I saw my parents near the entrance, their faces tight. Before I could say a word, Mom stepped forward, her voice icy. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Your sister told us you've been causing trouble. Trouble I'd paid for every detail of this night. I glanced at my sister standing behind them, her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. She says you're stirring up drama, Dad added, his tone clipped. You're not welcome. The words hit like a punch. My own parents at the party I'd funded were kicking me out. Guests nearby turned, their conversations faltering. I kept my composure, my voice steady. Is that what you think? I asked, locking eyes with my sister. Her smirk flickered, but she doubled down. You've been spreading lies about me, she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. You're jealous of my success. Lies. I'd spent the last week with Sheila's folder burning a hole in my conscience. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative. I turned to the entrance and nodded. Sheila walked in, her expression calm but unyielding. The room went quiet. My sister's face drained of color. "What's she doing here?" she stammered, her voice cracking. Sheila stepped forward, holding the same folder I'd seen at the cafe. "Tell them," she said, her tone sharp. "Tell them how you took $15,000 from the family account." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My sister's eyes darted to our parents, then back to Sheila. "That's not true," she snapped, but her hands were shaking. "You're making this up." Sheila didn't flinch. She opened the folder, pulling out a bank statement and holding it up. "These are your withdrawals," she said. "Clothes, trips, a car deposit. Want me to read the dates?" The guests leaned in, whispering, their eyes darting between us. My parents tried to intervene. "This isn't the place," Mom hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled away. "No," I said, my voice louder now. "You knew about this and told me to let it go." Dad's face reddened. "Keep your voice down," he muttered, glancing at the crowd. But it was too late. The whispers grew louder. Phones were out, recording the chaos. My sister tried to salvage it, stepping toward Sheila. "You're just bitter," she spat. "You've always been jealous." Sheila didn't budge. "I lent you money, you never repaid," she said. "And I'm not the only one you've lied to." The tension was electric, every guest hanging on their words. I stood back, watching my sister unravel. She'd built her life on appearances, and now it was crumbling in front of everyone. I didn't need to say more. Sheila's evidence and her own panic were enough. The air in the banquet hall was still buzzing from the confrontation. I stepped away from the crowd, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I found Emily, the resort manager, near the catering station, her clipboard in hand. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos behind me. Emily raised an eyebrow but nodded, leading me to a quiet office. I didn't waste time. "I'm withdrawing my credit card from the event," I told her. "Cancel all payments." Her eyes widened. "That's a $5,000 deposit," she said, checking her records. "And the remaining balance, another $15,000, is due today." I nodded. "I'm done covering it." Emily hesitated, then picked up her phone to call the vendors. I stood there watching her dial, knowing there was no turning back. Within minutes, the catering team got the call. They started packing up, pulling trays of appetizers from the tables. The string quartet stopped tuning their instruments, their manager shaking his head as he spoke to Emily. "No payment, no performance," he said, loud enough for guests to hear. Whispers turned to murmurs as people noticed the staff dismantling the dessert station. The party, my parents' perfect anniversary, was unraveling. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was drowned out by the weight of everything I'd carried for years. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect. My parents stormed over, their faces a mix of shock and fury. "What are you doing?" Mom demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the growing chaos. "You're ruining our day." Dad grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Fix this, Gretchen," he said, his tone low but desperate. I pulled away, meeting their eyes. "I've been fixing things my whole life," I said, my words calm but firm. "I paid for this party and you kicked me out because of her lies." My sister pushed through the crowd, her makeup smudged, her voice shrill. "You're so selfish," she shouted. "This is about Mom and Dad, not your grudges." The guests fell silent, their eyes darting between us. I took a deep breath, turning to face the crowd. "Let me set this straight," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "My sister took $15,000 from our family account, money I put in for our parents' home, their bills." I held up Sheila's folder, the one she'd handed me at the cafe. "She spent it on clothes, trips, a car." And they knew. I pointed to my parents, who froze. Gasps echoed through the hall. My sister's face crumpled, her hands clenching. "That's a lie," she screamed, but her voice wavered, betraying her. A woman nearby muttered, "I knew something was off," and others nodded, their phones still out, capturing every word. Mom tried to salvage it. "This is a family matter," she said, her voice pleading. "Don't air our business like this." But I wasn't backing down. "You told me to let it go," I said, looking at her. "You covered for her, both of you." Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. The truth was out and the guests were eating it up, their whispers now a low roar. The catering staff left through a side door, the quartet packed their instruments, and Emily approached me, her face grim. "Without payment, we're shutting down," she said. I nodded, feeling a strange calm. The party was over, and so was my role as the family's doormat. My sister lunged forward, her voice breaking. "You're destroying everything!" She cried, tears streaming down her face. I looked at her, unflinching. "You did that yourself," I said. The weight of those words settled over me, heavy but freeing. I walked toward the exit, the folder still in my hand, as the hall descended into chaos behind me. This wasn't the end, but it was a start. By the next morning, the fallout was undeniable. Emily, the resort manager, called me with a clipped tone. "The vendors are furious," she said. "They're out $10,000 for unpaid services catering music decorations." She explained that the catering company and the string quartet were preparing to sue, and my sister's name was on the contracts as the point of contact. "They're coming after her," Emily added, her voice heavy with frustration. I didn't feel sorry for my sister. She'd spent our family's money on her own whims, and now the consequences were hers to face. My phone buzzed with texts from Mom. "How could you let this happen?" She wrote, her words dripping with blame. "You humiliated us." I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. Humiliated them. I'd funded their celebration only to be thrown out on her word. Dad called an hour later, his voice gruff. "You need to fix this, Gretchen," he said. "Apologize to your sister and pay the vendors." I laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm done cleaning up her messes," I said, and hung up. They'd spent years shielding her, ignoring her lies, and now they wanted me to take the fall. I wasn't playing that game anymore. By evening, the story was everywhere. Guests had posted videos of the confrontation on social media, tagging my sister's influencer account. Clips showed her shouting, denying everything, while Sheila held up the bank statement. The comments were brutal. "She stole from her own family, and what kind of sister does that?" Her follower count dropped by thousands overnight. Brands unfollowed her, and her latest sponsored post, a skincare ad, was flooded with accusations. She tried to post a vague apology claiming a misunderstanding, but it only fueled the fire. People dug deeper, reposting screenshots of her lavish trips and designer purchases, linking them to the stolen money. Her reputation as an influencer was in tatters. My parents weren't spared either. A local gossip page on social media picked up the story, and soon posts were circulating about their role. They knew she was stealing and did nothing. One comment read, shared hundreds of times. Neighbors who'd attended the party chimed in, calling them out for favoring one daughter while shunning the other. At a coffee shop the next day, I overheard two women discussing it. "Those parents should be ashamed," one said, shaking her head. I kept my head down, but inside I felt a grim satisfaction. They'd chosen to protect her, and now the community was holding them accountable. My sister called me that night, her voice trembling. "You've ruined my life," she said, tears choking her words. "The vendors are threatening to sue me." I stayed calm. My response measured. "You took the money," I said. "You signed the contracts." She sobbed, begging me to cover the $10,000 to make it go away. I refused. "Figure it out," I told her, and ended the call. Later, Mom sent another text accusing me of tearing the family apart. I didn't respond. I drove back to the resort to collect my belongings, the place now eerily quiet. Emily handed me a refund check for part of my deposit, her expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said. I nodded, tucking the check into my bag, and walked out. The weight of their blame lingered, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd carried their expectations for too long, and now I was done. The truth was out, and the consequences were theirs to bear. I had my own life to rebuild. Weeks after the party collapsed, I made a choice that changed everything. I sat down with my accountant, and severed all financial ties with my family. No more shared accounts, no more covering their bills, no more bailing them out. I closed the family fund I'd contributed to for years, the one my sister had drained for her own gain. It felt like shedding a heavy coat I'd worn too long. For the first time, I put my money into myself, my apartment, my savings, a weekend trip to clear my head. I started therapy, something I'd avoided for years, and began unraveling the guilt I'd carried for being the family's fixer. I wasn't their hero anymore, and that was okay. My sister's life unraveled differently. The catering company and string quartet followed through on their threats, filing lawsuits against her for $10,000 in unpaid services. She tried to dodge the legal notices, but the resort's contracts had her name, not mine. Her lawyer sent me a letter suggesting I share responsibility since I'd initially funded the event. I didn't respond. She'd made her choices, and I wasn't cleaning up her mess anymore. On social media, her influencer career was dead. Her follower count plummeted to under 1,000, and brands dropped her like a bad habit. Comments on her old posts were ruthless, calling her out for lies and theft. She posted a tearful video claiming she'd been misunderstood, but it only drew more scorn. I didn't watch it. I'd seen enough. My parents faced their own reckoning. The community's judgment didn't let up. Local forums and social media groups kept the story alive with posts dissecting their favoritism. How do you let one daughter steal and blame the other one? Viral thread read shared over 1,000 times. Neighbors stopped inviting them to gatherings, and their church group grew distant. Mom called me one evening, her voice trembling. "We're the talk of the town," she said, as if I could fix it. "You need to make this right." I stayed calm, my words steady. "You chose her over me," I said. "Live with it." Dad sent a text later asking me to reconsider for the sake of family. I left it on read. Their silence during her theft had cost them my trust. I moved forward, finding peace in small things. I took up hiking, spending weekends on trails outside Santa Barbara, the ocean breeze clearing my thoughts. I reconnected with old friends, ones who didn't expect me to solve their problems. Sheila reached out, checking in over coffee. "You did the right thing," she told me, her voice warm. I nodded, grateful for her honesty that started it all. At work, I threw myself into projects, earning a promotion I'd put off chasing to deal with family drama. My life felt lighter, like I'd reclaimed space I didn't know I'd lost. The lesson hit me slowly but clearly. Boundaries weren't selfish. They were survival. I'd spent years trying to hold my family together, thinking it made me strong. But strength wasn't carrying everyone else's weight. It was knowing when to let go. Cutting them off hurt, but it freed me. I didn't need their approval to be whole. My sister's lawsuits, my parents' disgrace, they were consequences of their own making. I'd given enough. Now I was building a life for me, one step at a time, and the peace I found was worth every sacrifice.
"Made you something special, dear," Trevor said, setting the steaming mug down in front of me with that same overly cheerful tone he'd been using lately. The smell hit me immediately. Bitter, almost metallic. Nothing like the herbal teas I usually drank. "You're so kind," I replied, forcing a smile while my stomach churned with unease. "My name is Dana Wilkes. I'm 43 years old, and I've been married to Trevor for 8 years. We live in a modest 2-story house in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I work as a quality control manager at Sundale Financial. For the past 3 months, our lives had been turned upside down by an unwelcome houseguest, Kenny, Trevor's younger brother, who had moved into our spare room after his latest girlfriend kicked him out. As I stared at the suspicious tea, Kenny slouched into the kitchen wearing nothing but basketball shorts, his usual smirk plastered across his face. At 35, he acted like he was still in college, and he never missed an opportunity to make snide comments about my uptight personality or my boring job. "Morning, Dana," he drawled, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. "Still drinking that fancy health crap, I see." Trevor quickly poured Kenny a cup from the same pot he'd used for mine, his movements slightly hurried. Something about his behavior felt off, but I couldn't quite place what. Actually, I made this blend special for Dana, Trevor said, avoiding eye contact with me. It's supposed to help with stress. The way he emphasized the word made my skin crawl. I'd been dealing with increasing anxiety lately, mostly due to Kenny's constant presence and Trevor's growing distance from me. But this tea smelled nothing like any stress relief remedy I'd ever encountered. Kenny plopped down at the kitchen island next to me, his usual spot for making commentary about everything I did. Stress, huh? Maybe if you loosened up a little, you wouldn't need magic potions. I bit my tongue, as I'd learned to do over the past few months. Fighting with Kenny only made Trevor defensive of his brother, and I was tired of being painted as the villain in my own home. As Trevor turned to put the teapot back on the stove, I made a split-second decision. With practiced stealth, I quietly slid my mug closer to Kenny's spot while sliding his toward mine. Oops, mix them up, I said sweetly, handing Kenny the cup that had originally been intended for me. He shrugged and took a long gulp, as if it were soda rather than hot tea. Tastes weird, he muttered, but continued drinking. I watched him carefully, noting how Trevor's shoulders tensed when he turned back around and saw Kenny with my cup. The tension in the kitchen was palpable as I sipped from Kenny's original cup, plain black tea with nothing suspicious about it. Trevor kept glancing between Kenny and me, his jaw clenched in a way I recognized as barely controlled panic. Our marriage hadn't always been this strained. When we first met at a company mixer 5 years ago, Trevor worked as an accountant at Driftline Construction, and he seemed genuinely interested in my career and ambitions. He'd listened to my stories about catching financial discrepancies at work, praising my attention to detail and analytical mind. Back then, he called those qualities amazing rather than obsessive. Things began changing about a year ago when Trevor lost his job due to company downsizing. His confidence crumbled, and he started drinking more, spending days on the couch while I worked extra hours to cover our mortgage. When Kenny showed up 3 months ago, claiming he needed just a few weeks to get back on his feet, Trevor welcomed him with open arms despite my protests. Kenny had always resented me, probably because I refused to tolerate his juvenile behavior the way everyone else in Trevor's family did. At family gatherings, he'd make jokes about my stick up my ass and how I was changing his brother. Trevor would laugh along, leaving me to sit there humiliated and alone. But lately, Kenny's comments had taken on a darker edge. He'd started making references to how much better off Trevor would be without me, how I was holding him back from his true potential. Last week, I'd overheard him on the phone with someone, talking about how I had a decent life insurance policy, and how Trevor deserved to start fresh. That conversation had prompted me to start being more careful around both of them. I'd begun keeping a small digital recorder in my purse, documenting some of their more concerning conversations. I'd also contacted my old friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal, asking hypothetical questions about suspicious behavior and evidence collection. You know, Kenny said, setting down his mug and wiping his mouth, this stuff really does taste awful. You sure you know what you're doing with these tea experiments, Trevor? Trevor's face had gone pale. It's an acquired taste. Maybe you should drink some water. I'm fine, Kenny waved him off. Takes more than some bitter tea to knock me down. I continued sipping my safe cup while observing the growing panic in my husband's eyes. Whatever had been in that original tea, it wasn't meant to be a harmless stress reliever. The metallic smell, Trevor's nervous behavior, and his obvious distress at seeing Kenny drink it all pointed to something far more sinister. 20 minutes had passed since Kenny finished the suspicious tea when he suddenly doubled over. Oh, God, Kenny gasped, clutching his stomach as sweat beaded across his forehead. Something's really wrong. He stumbled from the kitchen island to the living room couch, his face turning an alarming shade of green. Trevor rushed after him, his panic no longer concealed. What's happening to him? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. I pulled out my phone, pretending to consider calling for help while actually starting the voice recording app. "I don't know," Trevor stammered, kneeling beside his brother. "Maybe he ate something bad. Kenny, what did you have for dinner last night?" Kenny could barely speak through the waves of nausea. "Nothing. Different." "Trevor, what was in that tea?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Trevor's eyes darted to me, then back to his brother, his mouth opening and closing without words. "Trevor," I said calmly, never breaking eye contact with my husband, "what exactly was in that tea you made for me?" His face went completely white. In that moment, I saw the truth written across his features: guilt, fear, and the dawning realization that his plan had gone horribly wrong. Kenny's condition was deteriorating rapidly. His breathing became shallow, and he started shaking uncontrollably. "Call ambulance," he managed to whisper. I dialed 911, speaking clearly and calmly to the dispatcher, while keeping my phone positioned to catch every word. "My brother-in-law is experiencing severe stomach pain and nausea after drinking tea. He's sweating profusely and seems to be having difficulty breathing." While we waited for the paramedics, I carefully moved to the kitchen and used a clean plastic bag to preserve what remained of the original teapot and the mug Kenny had drunk from. Years of quality control work had taught me the importance of evidence preservation. "Dana, what are you doing?" Trevor asked, his voice cracking. "Making sure the doctors have everything they need to help Kenny," I replied evenly. "They'll want to know exactly what he consumed." The ambulance arrived within minutes, followed closely by a police car, standard procedure for potential poisoning cases, the officer explained. As the paramedics worked on Kenny, loading him onto a stretcher, I approached the responding officer. "Officer Martinez," I said, reading his name tag. "I think you should know that my husband prepared this tea specifically for me, but my brother-in-law drank it by mistake." Trevor's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with horror at my words. "Ma'am, we'll need to take statements from both of you," the officer replied, already reaching for his notepad. As they wheeled Kenny out to the ambulance, I caught Trevor's arm. "The truth has a way of coming out," I said quietly, so only he could hear. "You might want to think about that." The look of pure terror in his eyes told me everything I needed to know about what had really been in that tea. At the hospital, I sat in the sterile waiting room while doctors worked to stabilize Kenny. Trevor paced nearby, his hands shaking as he repeatedly checked his phone. The police had taken our initial statements, but I knew they'd be back with more questions once they determined what had poisoned Kenny. "Mrs. Wilkes?" A doctor approached us with a grim expression. "I'm Dr. Henderson. Your brother-in-law is stable for now, but we found concerning levels of antifreeze compounds in his blood." Trevor dropped into a chair like his legs had given out. Antifreeze, ethylene glycol, was a particularly insidious poison. It initially tasted sweet, which would explain why Kenny had been able to drink the entire cup despite complaining about the bitterness. The bitter metallic smell I'd detected must have been from something Trevor added to mask the antifreeze taste. "Antifreeze?" I repeated, feigning shock. "How could that be possible?" Dr. Henderson's expression was serious. "This appears to be intentional poisoning. The police will need to investigate your home and any beverages consumed this morning." Trevor's face had gone beyond pale to a sickly gray color. I reached over and squeezed his hand, playing the concerned wife perfectly. "Honey, you look terrible. This must be such a shock." What Trevor didn't know was that I'd been documenting suspicious behavior for weeks. Hidden in my home office was a small safe containing printed emails, photographs, and recorded conversations that painted a very different picture of my loving husband. It had started a month ago when I'd accidentally opened a piece of mail addressed to Trevor, a confirmation for a life insurance policy increase on me. When I asked him about it, he claimed it was just being responsible and planning for the future. But the timing, combined with Kenny's increasingly hostile comments about my holding Trevor back, had made me suspicious. I'd begun paying closer attention to their conversations, especially the late-night talks they thought I couldn't hear from upstairs. Using a baby monitor app on my phone, I'd recorded several disturbing exchanges where they discussed how my death would solve Trevor's financial problems and free him from our miserable marriage. The most damning recording was from just 3 days ago, when Kenny had joked about how accidents happen all the time, and Trevor had responded that he just needed the right opportunity. They'd laughed about it, as if planning my murder was some kind of twisted bonding activity. Mr. and Mrs. Wilkes? Detective Sarah Cross approached us, introducing herself as the lead investigator. We'll need to search your home and collect any beverages or containers that might be relevant to this case. Of course, I said immediately. We want to help in any way we can. This is just so frightening. The idea that someone could have poisoned Kenny in our own home. Trevor remained silent, staring at the floor. Mr. Wilkes, Detective Cross addressed him directly. I understand you prepared the tea that your brother consumed? Yes, but it wasn't meant for him, Trevor stammered. I made it for Dana, but somehow the cups got mixed up. The detective's eyebrows raised slightly. So you're saying this poison was intended for your wife? I watched Trevor realize his mistake, how his attempt to deflect suspicion had actually made things worse for him. No. I don't know how the antifreeze got in there. Maybe someone broke into our house, or maybe it was contaminated somehow. His story was falling apart in real time, and we all knew it. Detective Cross took detailed notes while I maintained my shocked and confused expression. Mrs. Wilkes, did you notice anything unusual about the tea when your husband served it to you? Actually, yes, I said thoughtfully. It smelled odd, metallic, not like any tea I'd had before. That's why I was hesitant to drink it. The search of our home yielded exactly what I'd expected it would. Detective Cross and her team found the antifreeze container in Trevor's workshop, with his fingerprints clearly visible on the cap. They also discovered internet search history on his laptop detailing ethylene glycol poisoning symptoms and detection methods. But what they didn't find was the evidence I'd been carefully collecting for weeks. Mrs. Wilkes, would you mind coming to the station to give a more detailed statement? Detective Cross asked as the search concluded. Absolutely. I want to help however I can, I replied, grabbing my purse, the one containing my digital recorder and the key to my office safe. At the police station, I sat across from Detective Cross in a small interview room, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I need to be completely honest with you, I began, my voice trembling just enough to suggest emotional distress. I've been worried about my safety for weeks now. Detective Cross leaned forward, her attention fully focused. My husband has been acting strangely since he lost his job, and his brother Kenny has been living with us, making these awful comments about how I'm ruining Trevor's life. Last week I overheard them talking about my life insurance policy. I paused, letting that information sink in before continuing. I was scared, so I started recording some of their conversations. I know it sounds paranoid, but after this morning, I think my instincts were right. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from 3 days ago. Kenny's voice filled the room. Accidents happen all the time, you know. People drink the wrong things, slip and fall, all kinds of unfortunate events. Trevor's response was even more damning. I just need the right opportunity, something that looks natural. Detective Cross's expression grew increasingly serious as she listened to more recordings. In one, Kenny suggested that my accident should happen soon, because he was tired of living in this depressing house with that uptight witch. In another, Trevor complained about how my controlling nature was preventing him from accessing our joint savings account to pay Kenny's debts. There's more, I said quietly, producing a key from my purse. I've been keeping copies of emails and documents in a safe at home. I was planning to talk to a lawyer next week, but after what happened to Kenny..." The detective's eyes widened as I explained about the life insurance policy increase, the suspicious online purchases on Trevor's credit card, and the pattern of escalating verbal abuse that had made me fear for my safety. "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" she asked. "I wasn't sure anyone would believe me," I admitted. Kenny can be very charming when he wants to be, and Trevor had everyone convinced that I was just being paranoid because of work stress. I thought I needed more evidence before I could prove what they were planning. Detective Cross studied me carefully. "Mrs. Wilkes, you realize that if your husband intended to poison you and your brother-in-law drank it instead, that's attempted murder?" "I understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just can't believe the man I married could actually try to kill me. But the evidence speaks for itself." What the detective didn't need to know was how carefully I'd orchestrated this entire scenario. How I'd deliberately mentioned Trevor's special tea routine to Kenny the night before, knowing his competitive nature would make him want to try whatever was too good for him. How I'd practiced switching the cups until I could do it seamlessly. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting someone's own evil plans destroy them. The next several hours unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. Detective Cross retrieved the evidence from my home safe, including emails between Trevor and Kenny discussing getting rid of the problem and researching undetectable poisons. The digital paper trail was extensive and damning. Trevor was arrested that evening at the hospital, where he'd been maintaining his vigil beside Kenny's bed. Not out of brotherly love, but out of fear that Kenny might wake up and implicate him. The irony wasn't lost on me that his attempt to appear caring had actually made him look more suspicious. "Mrs. Wilkes," Detective Cross called me with an update the following morning. "Your brother-in-law regained consciousness overnight. He's corroborating your account of events and has provided additional information about your husband's plans." It seemed that Kenny, faced with the reality of nearly dying, had decided to save himself by confessing everything. He admitted to pressuring Trevor to do something about me, claiming that my controlling behavior and financial management were preventing Trevor from lending him money for his mounting debts. According to Kenny's statement, they had originally planned to make my death look like an accident. But Trevor had grown impatient when I started questioning the increased life insurance policy. The antifreeze poisoning was meant to appear like I'd accidentally consumed contaminated tea, a tragic mishap that would leave Trevor a grieving widower with a substantial insurance payout. "There's something else," Detective Cross continued. "We found additional evidence in your husband's workshop. It appears this wasn't his first attempt to harm you." My blood ran cold despite knowing I should be safe now. "What do you mean?" "We found evidence that he'd been adding small amounts of prescription sleep medication to your coffee for weeks. Not enough to seriously harm you, but enough to make you appear more forgetful and unstable. He was building a case for you being mentally incompetent." The revelation explained so much. My recent struggles with memory, the fatigue I'd attributed to stress, the way Trevor had started pointing out my mistakes to friends and family. He'd been systematically undermining my credibility while slowly poisoning me. "We believe he was planning to escalate gradually until he could claim you'd accidentally overdosed on your own medication," the detective explained. "The antifreeze was likely Plan B when the slow poisoning wasn't working fast enough." I sat in stunned silence, processing the full scope of Trevor's betrayal. Not only had he planned to murder me, but he'd been mentally and physically abusing me for months in preparation. "Mrs. Wilkes, I want you to know that your quick thinking and evidence collection may have saved your life," Detective Cross said. "Without those recordings and documents, we might not have been able to prove premeditation." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Trevor had tried to poison me less than 24 hours ago, and felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. I'd outsmarted him, protected myself, and ensured that justice would be served. But I'd also lost the man I'd thought I loved, discovered that my marriage had been a lie, and learned that someone I'd trusted implicitly had been slowly killing me. The house felt different now, quieter, and somehow cleaner without Trevor and Kenny's toxic presence. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely in my own home. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, my paralegal friend. "Saw the news. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I smiled as I typed back, "I'm safe now, and I think I'm going to be just fine." 6 months later, I stood outside the courthouse steps, breathing in the crisp autumn air of Charlotte. The trial had concluded with Trevor receiving a sentence of 25 years for attempted murder, and Kenny getting 5 years as an accessory. Justice had been served, but my real revenge was just beginning. During the trial, every detail of their plan had been exposed to public scrutiny. The media had dubbed it the anti-freeze murder plot, and the story had spread throughout our community and beyond. Trevor's reputation was permanently destroyed. His family had disowned him, and he'd lost everything: his freedom, his marriage, and any hope of the insurance money he'd killed for. But the most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't his imprisonment. It was watching him realize, piece by piece, how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered him. The prosecution had presented my evidence methodically. The recordings that proved premeditation, the digital trail showing his research into poisons, and the documentation of his previous attempts to slowly poison me with sleep medication. Trevor's defense attorney had tried to paint me as a manipulative wife who'd driven him to desperation. But the evidence spoke louder than any character assassination. What truly devastated Trevor, though, was learning how long I'd been aware of his plans. During my testimony, I'd calmly explained how I'd suspected something was wrong weeks before the antifreeze incident. I'd described installing the baby monitor app, setting up the hidden recorder, and carefully documenting his every move. "You see, Your Honor," I'd said, looking directly at Trevor across the courtroom, "my husband always underestimated my intelligence. He thought I was just an uptight, controlling wife who paid too much attention to details. But those details are what saved my life." The look of absolute defeat in Trevor's eyes when he realized I'd been 3 steps ahead of him the entire time was worth every sleepless night I'd spent gathering evidence. He'd planned my murder for months, but I'd planned his downfall even longer. With Trevor behind bars and Kenny serving his sentence, I was finally free to reclaim my life. The first thing I did was sell our house. The place held too many dark memories, and I wanted a fresh start. I used the proceeds to buy a small cottage on the outskirts of Charlotte, complete with a garden where I could grow my own herbs for tea. The irony wasn't lost on me. My job at Sundale Financial had been understanding throughout the ordeal, and my supervisor had even offered me a promotion to Senior Quality Control Manager. My skills in identifying discrepancies and maintaining meticulous records had proven invaluable, both professionally and personally. I'd also started volunteering with a local domestic violence organization, helping other women recognize the warning signs of abuse that I'd initially missed. Many of them were surprised to learn that poison was more common in domestic violence cases than people realized, and that emotional manipulation often preceded physical harm. The thing about abusers, I'd tell the women in our support group, is that they always underestimate their victims. They think we're too weak, too trusting, or too scared to fight back. But sometimes, the best defense is letting them defeat themselves. My story had become something of a local legend. The quality control manager who'd applied her professional skills to catch her would-be murderer. Several women had reached out to thank me for showing them that they weren't powerless, that careful planning and documentation could protect them from dangerous partners. The cottage felt like a sanctuary after years of walking on eggshells around Trevor and Kenny. I could drink my morning tea without fear, work in my garden without looking over my shoulder, and sleep peacefully knowing that the only person who could hurt me now was safely locked away. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. And I had ensured that Trevor would spend decades regretting the day he'd underestimated Dana Wilkes. As I tend to my herb garden now, brewing my own safe blends each morning, I often reflect on how my methodical nature, the very trait Trevor found so insufferable, became the weapon that destroyed his evil plans and secured my freedom.